So good morning. It's nice to see you all in Minneapolis, and a special welcome to those of you joining online. Since 1899, the mission of APS has been to advance physics. But today, we recognize that advancing physics means advancing justice, equity, diversity, and inclusivity in science, a cause that matters deeply to all of us at APS and in our global community. For many of us, this means examining our actions and our hidden assumptions. But it also means working on our practice of listening, truly listening, as we engage in difficult conversations and as we reflect deeply on what we learn, including in sessions like this morning's Kavli Foundation Keynote Primary. So thank you very much to the Kavli Foundation for making it possible. This session is being chaired by Dr. Abe Despande, Distinguished Professor at Stony Brook, Director of EIC Science at Brookhaven, and Chair of the April Meeting Program Committee. He's joined on the stage by Dr. Asmeret Berhe, a soil biogeochemist and political ecologist, who is Director of the Office of Science at the U.S. Department of Energy. We'll also hear from Dr. Deidra Hodges, an electrical engineer with expertise in solar voltaics and solar energy, who's chair of the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering at Florida International University, and Dr. Kétévi Assamagan, a senior nuclear and particle physicist at Brookhaven National Laboratory, an APS fellow and co-founder of the African School of Physics. So please join me this morning in listening closely to what they will say and thinking about actions you can take, and in welcoming them to the session. Abe, over to you.
Thank you, Jonathan. It is my extreme pleasure to introduce to you today's opening speaker of the Kavli session, Dr. Asmeret Berhe. Dr. Berhe is the Director of Office of Science for the U.S. Department of Energy. She's currently on leave from University of California, Merced, where she holds the Ted and Gian Velasco Chair in Earth Sciences and Geology. She's a professor of soil biochemistry and previously served as Associate Dean for Graduate Education. Her research focus lies on intersections of soil science, global change science, and political ecology, with an emphasis on how soil systems regulate Earth's climate and the dynamic two-way relationship between the natural environment and human communities. Her scholarship and efforts to ensure equity and inclusion for people from all walks of life in scientific enterprise have received numerous awards and honors. She's a member of the National Academy of Engineering. She's also a fellow of the American Geophysical Union and Geological Society of America, and a member of the inaugural class of U.S. National Academy's New Voice in Science, Engineering, and Medicine. Dr. Berhe received her bachelor's degree in soil and water conservation from University of Asmeret, her master's degree in political ecology in Michigan State University, and a PhD in biochemistry from University of California, Berkeley. It is my honor to invite Dr. Berhe.
Good morning, everyone. I'm truly honored to be here. Thank you for having me with the organizers, the meeting chair. I'm really thrilled to kick off today's Kavli session on foundations, on social session, I should say, on justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion in science. The Office of Science has a long-standing partnership with the Kavli Foundation. In particular, some of you might know that we have a collaborative project called Science for Public Engagement Partnership, or SciPEP for short, that is actually meant to engage with the public around fundamental scientific research, a topic that I think is extremely important because a lot of science communication is around applied areas and applications of basic science. Equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility are central of the work that we do with the Kavli Foundation, including who has access to training and resources to communicate about research, as well as engaging all members of the public around basic science. Our shared goal is to remove barriers that exclude a segment of society from science and science communication. In everything that we do in the Office of Science, we aim for an inclusive excellence, both in the grants we support and all the other engagements involved. Allow me a few minutes to tell you a bit about me and my background before I talk about what we're doing at the Department of Energy's Office of Science in support of the nation's R&D enterprise and to create a vibrant next generation of science and technology workforce for the nation. As director of the Office of Science, I'm extremely honored to serve in this position. And it's never lost on me that I'm the first person of color and the first Earth scientist to lead the Office of Science. Serving in this role is, of course, a huge responsibility, but is also an incredible honor, and in many ways is groundbreaking and exciting. But I want to be clear about the fact that, for somebody who shares my background, getting to where I am was not really an easy path. So I want to share a little bit of that journey with you. I was born in East Africa, in Eritrea, and came from a rather large family. I was a nerdy child, no surprise to anybody here. Child who always had her nose in her books. And my father actually took to calling me the professor when I was a little kid because I loved learning about things and then explaining it to people. And so I grew up, in an environment that fostered creativity and learning. And this had a huge impact on me, obviously. On my mind, I was always going to have a career in science, in one way or the other. So after earning my undergrad degree in soil science at the University of Asmeret in Eritrea, I moved to the US and earned, as you heard, my master's from Michigan State, and then went on to pursue my PhD in biogeochemistry. While I was working on my PhD, I also got married. I had one child, secured a rather prestigious postdoctoral fellowship, and other funding that also allowed me to stay at UC Berkeley and later at UC Davis to do my postdoctoral research. It was after that that I moved to UC Merced, where I established a soil biogeochemistry lab, had a second child, had a rather wonderful academic career, and I did all of this with a husband who's also an academic. It's a rather common story in academic circles, right? And it wouldn't surprise anybody here that there were other additional obstacles on my path. One of the vivid memories that I have from my grad school days is walking down a hallway in the department, in the building that housed my graduate program, and looking at the pictures of all the graduate students and the faculty in the department, and walking all the way down this rather long hallway full of pictures and realizing that I was the only black face in the midst of this. There was nobody else, no other student that looked like me. This, as you can imagine, had a huge impact on me in many ways. I experienced firsthand how exclusionary behaviors in STEM affect especially early career researchers. And it's why I've spent a lot of time trying to learn the scholarship on the lack of diversity in STEM. What causes it? How are we able to go on year after year, decade after decade, without making any significant improvements? I really needed to understand how things like this happen. And that was really helpful, I think, even in my growth as an academic. I got through it, though. I'm here standing in front of you today. One, simply because I refused to give up. And second, thanks to a number of very supportive folks I had in my corner, a supportive network of folks that I was able to have around me. Some of those wonderful mentors that I've been fortunate to have during my education and careers are members of your professional community, actually. Most notably, my PhD advisor at Berkeley is a physicist turned ecologist, John Hart, that I don't know how many people might know, a wonderful human being, but an incredible also scientist, who received his PhD in physics from Harvard, moved on to do theoretical physics in Wisconsin and secure an assistant professor position in physics at Yale before he decided he wanted to apply his knowledge towards ecology and climate change related topics, and moved on to Berkeley. And I was fortunate that our paths crossed there, and he became my faculty advisor at UC Berkeley. I'm also married to an environmental physicist. Another twist, as luck would have it, another mentor that I was able to secure who was really instrumental in helping me succeed was a biogeochemist named Margaret Torn at the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. And it is this particular mentoring that actually introduced me to the world of DOE when I was a graduate student. It was through Margaret that I was able to understand that, I was on campus at Berkeley, but what was going on at the Lawrence Berkeley lab up the hill, but also got an opportunity to learn about these amazing user facilities that the Department of Energy has, and was able to apply some of the tools and techniques in the user facilities towards improving the research that I was doing for my PhD. And as you can imagine, that was incredibly helpful in many ways. And so because of my own personal background, experiences, and everything else that I've learned along the way, one of the things that has become incredibly important for me and a responsibility that I take very seriously in this job is to make sure that we're doing everything in our power to contribute to making STEM inclusive and accessible to all. Not just via recruitment or more and more Black and brown people to come into our institutions, but also ensuring that the people we recruit can actually stay and succeed. Focusing on retention and success of people from all walks of life in STEM. Before I switch kind of topics here, I wanted to express to you all that I really love soil. If you Google me or you look up anything on my background, you will quickly discover that I will be talking about soil, till the cows come home, or whatever that expression is. And if you're not serious about that, you can look at not just my pictures, but even how I celebrate my birthday. That's a cake that my husband got me on my last birthday. He clearly understands his wife very well. Okay. So going back to the topic, we're charting a path forward at the Office of Science at DOE in general. And our goal is to achieve a strong scientific and technological workforce that looks like America and that serves all Americans. We must address historic inequities and root causes of why the current level of underrepresentation of people from different backgrounds in STEM has happened and continues to happen. The goal here is, of course, to do the right thing. First, because it's important to do the right thing. We are a publicly funded agency. We take the responsibility to serve the public very seriously. This is important because the experiences that I had as a student are not unique, unfortunately. More than 75% of PhD students in a survey that was published by Nature report experiencing either gender harassment or racial discrimination during their education. And most of that is experienced at the hands or caused by supervisors that are actually entrusted to help and mentor the students on their academic path. The other really sad statistic that has become common that I hope improves is also that 62% of higher ed employees report to witnessing or experiencing bullying or harassment in the workplace. STEM workplaces happen to be one where harassment, discrimination is rather prevalent compared to many other sectors of the economy. So over the last few years, in particular since 2020, there's been some progress, right? But I think we all agree that the progress that we've seen has not been enough, and we need to do better. Women have advanced rapidly in many professional roles since the 1970s, but still remain underrepresented in STEM, many fields of STEM. As of now, a total of 31% of doctoral degrees in the physical sciences are awarded to women. Black, Hispanic, and Native American people in STEM remain severely underrepresented, in particular in areas like physics and my own academic field of earth sciences, and including computational science and other areas. On average, only about 7% of the people who earn PhDs in STEM are Black people. Just about 12% are Hispanic. Meanwhile, the share of Native American and Alaska Native students earning PhDs in STEM has actually fallen in recent years, in the last decade, to about 0.5%. Meanwhile, the growth in STEM jobs, which happen to pay good, is predicted to outgrow the number of folks we have who can fill the positions that are actually needed to be filled. That's a simple fact. And this means the US is losing its competitive edge, and we must do better. We can and must do better, and we have to take this opportunity that is in front of us to weave equity and inclusion into the fabric of the future science and technology enterprise as we address the current need to build a strong, capable, vibrant, and diverse workforce that will meet our nation's clean energy jobs and other needs. And so I want to take a time to tell you a little bit about what we're doing in the Office of Science. And there's a lot that we're doing. But before I go any further, allow me to speak a little bit about the Office of Science in case some folks in the audience are not familiar. So the Office of Science is the largest supporter of basic research in the nation, in physical sciences in the nation, with a budget of about $8 billion annually. We provide research funding to about 300 universities, all the Department of Energy national labs, and steward access to research facilities for tens and thousands of scientists from around the world. We deliver the scientific discoveries, capabilities, major scientific tools to transform the understanding of nature and advance the energy, economic, and national security of the US. We are fortunate at this moment to have the Biden-Harris administration that have been incredibly supportive of the scientific enterprise, and that the value of scientific exploration is recognized at the national scale. So the way I see it, we, the Office of Science, are all about supporting the great minds in the nation and providing them with the tools that they need to make discoveries. We're all about people, tools, and discoveries. We do this first by stewarding 10 of the 17 Department of Energy's national laboratories. All the ones marked in green are national laboratories that we manage out of the Office of Science. In all of these national laboratories, we support research across the physical sciences, including physics, of course, plus basic energy sciences, my own research area that falls in the programs under biological and environmental research, the advanced scientific computing research, fusion energy sciences, and so much more. In addition, we manage 28 of these incredible user facilities that offer everything from ultra-high-speed computing to particle accelerators, light sources, neutron sources, fusion demonstration facilities. My apologies. And end up supporting nearly 34,000 users annually. Simply put, the Office of Science has incredible resources, and with that, tremendous responsibility to communities and people to make wise investments that contribute to the nation's prosperity and well-being. And the foundation is here. Now we need to move forward to expand and diversify the scientific workforce. And at the Office of Science, we've come up with a number of programs and incentives to bring folks into the fold. We're deeply committed to supporting a diverse, equitable, inclusive, and accessible work environments for everyone, promoting people of all backgrounds, and harnessing a diverse range of views, expertise, and experiences for the U.S. science enterprise. And this is all happening in the context of President Biden's Justice 40 initiative, which ensures that 40% of the benefits of certain investments, in particular in areas of climate and clean energy, go to underserved communities. And everything that we're doing in the Office of Science around equity and inclusion would fall within this category too. And I'm going to give you a few acronyms that talk about some of the initiatives that we're working on. It's the government, so government work and alphabet soups go hand in hand together. So you have to kind of bear with me for a minute. All of these programs that you see here, Renew, FAIR, and peer plans, are tied to funding that is really changing the way things happen in STEM. To start with, I want to make sure everybody's aware that we have increased the graduate student pay for all the students we support through the Office of Science, including students that we support on multi-year fellowships, students that we support through SCGSR and other short-term fellowships, students that are paid from our grants to be able to earn at least $45,000 a year. And the idea here is we want to make sure that students, when they're pursuing their PhD programs, can actually earn a livable wage so that they don't have to go out there and drive Uber or get another job, so that just to be able to pay rent. We need people to be able to focus on their research, and the fact that whether they come from money or not should not be able should not become the deciding factor for how successfully they can complete their PhDs and research programs. So we're doing everything in our power to make sure that students earn a livable wage, and at this point, I believe this is the highest pay for grad students, a stipend that anybody is paying. Okay. So talking a little bit in detail about those three programs now. So we created, and this started in FY22, a program that we call Renew, stands for Reaching a New Energy Sciences Workforce. We'll provide opportunities for traineeship for students, researchers, and early career faculty, in particular from the institutions that are not currently well represented in the Office of Science portfolio. The Renew has been renewed again for FY23. In fact, the budget was doubled. And the idea here is to leverage the unique capabilities that we have in the national laboratories and user facilities and the scientific workforce there, and connect them with folks from emerging research institutions, historically Black colleges and universities, minority-serving institutions. Again, the group of communities that have not been part of the funding, federal funding landscape, and make sure that they receive the funding that they need to train their students. And this is all part of growing the next generation of the clean energy workforce. And the next program is one that I assume many of you that write grants to the Office of Science have heard about at this point, is one we call PEER, or Promoting Inclusive and Equitable Research, where we're now requiring all solicitations, everyone submitting proposals to us, to make sure that you're including a plan for how you're going to ensure that the project you're proposing will contribute to equity and inclusion. By doing this, we're sending a message to everyone that we all have a role to play here to change the trajectory going forward. We all have a role to play in making sure that we're being responsible stewards for public resources, that the resources that the public is entrusting us with to support the science and technology enterprise is going to be used in ways that are inclusive, and that it's not going to exclude anybody, right? PEER gets every PI to think about how they can be inclusive. And we have a huge latitude in how you want to go about doing this. But at the very least, we're asking everybody to contribute to make sure that these publicly funded resources are in fact helping include the public in the work that we're doing and are being inclusive of all the public. And this is an important way of making sure that, again, all those funds are contributing in a fair way. And gets me to talk about FAIR, the third initiative, which stands for Funding for Accelerated Inclusive Research. This one's a little different than Renew because it's about capacity building at those emerging research institutions, HBCUs and MSIs that I described. And again, these are the institutions that historically have received very little of the federal funding for STEM research, and our institutions that are serving communities that have been historically minoritized in STEM. So instead of just giving them resources to train, kind of the early career researchers and students and send them to our labs to do the work, we're helping them build capacity at their institutions too. We see FAIR as being a mutually beneficial relationship between our office and the partner institutions so that they can continue to perform basic research in the fields of interest for them. And we've committed $35 million to FAIR in FY 2023. And these are just some of the ways that our Office of Science is moving forward to address equity and inclusion in STEM. It's been our goal to drive the frontiers of science across disciplines while broadening participation of folks from all walks of life. I'm committed to help developing a strong and vibrant 21st century STEM workforce for the nation, one again that looks like America and is rooted in principles of belonging, access, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Together, I truly believe that we can shift the field in institutionalizing equitable and inclusive research practices so that more voices and contributions are valued and welcomed across the U.S. science and technology landscape. At the Office of Science, we're helping and are committed to doing even more. In addition to the programs I've mentioned, of course, the White House and the Biden-Harris administration are pushing also on these fronts. We're experiencing really a wholesale, if you will, a sea change throughout the federal government. At the Office of Science, we're publishing resources, arranging webinars, working on many ways to meet the community where they are and help develop plans that deliver on the goals of the initiatives that I discussed and more. I encourage everyone to engage and join these opportunities in whatever ways that you can. And along the way, we need to make sure that the clean energy transition that we need and that we are working on does not place undue burdens on communities that we're meant to be supported, right? For too long, communities that have been minoritized in STEM and society, marginalized in society, have borne the brunt of the issues and damage from things like climate change, and have been the ones that are been victimized by it and are experiencing the worst of its impacts. So whether it's social media, webinars, public engagements, and more, we're connecting as often as we can to make sure that we are addressing the needs of the community. We're aware, of course, first and foremost, about the needs of the community that we need to address. And there's a few different things that are happening right now. So if you're in institutions of higher education, for example, we're looking for your input on developing a quantum workforce, one of many areas that in the STEM and technology areas that we're interested in building a vibrant and growing workforce to support the quantum revolutions that are happening. And if you know community college students, I hope you could share with them that we have paid internships for them at our labs. Note that we're not only looking for researchers, but there are also many opportunities for engineers, program managers, support staff, skilled workforce, everything that's needed to support the science and technology enterprise. And of course, to all STEM grad students, we welcome you all to seek funding, to join us in work at the national labs through perhaps our graduate student research programs and many other opportunities that we offer. And of course, for undergrad students that you might know, I hope you would encourage them, or if you're an undergrad student yourself, to check out some of the student undergraduate lab internship programs or SULI programs. Many of them have deadlines that are coming up in the next month or so and are paid internships at the National Lab. So if you have students that you know would benefit from this, I hope you would join us in spreading the word. This is just a glimpse of everything we're doing at the Office of Science. We're, of course, making up for lost time, and we can't do it without you all. We can't do it alone. So I hope you would join us in spreading the word and making sure that the efforts go a long way. Thank you so much for listening. Really appreciate being invited to speak to you all today. And we have time to take questions. Thanks.
So there are 2 microphones there. I'm sure there are lots of questions and comments. Please approach them and we'll go one by one. And then maybe there are nothing on Zoom. Okay, go ahead.
Good morning. Jörg Reinhold, a faculty at Florida International University. I recently read the new solicitation for the Renew grant, and I was delighted to hear that we can ask for $45,000 for graduate students. The problem that we have is, if I communicate this to my dean for graduate studies in the college, I'm being told that we can only pay our students funded on grants more if we also pay the teaching assistants more. And this is supposedly federal regulations. I'm not sure whether those have changed and doesn't have percolated down, but you won't see from us applications for this amount, or even the higher amount that we are paying right now, which is ridiculously low, unless the university is willing to up the amount also to the university-funded students. And that's a problem for us. I'm not sure whether you have a solution or plans how to change that.
Thank you. That's an important point. I'm glad to offer a clarification. So as you rightfully stated, the way the grad students are paid is really depends on what university you're coming from. And from where I sit in the Office of Science, I can offer the money to do it, but unfortunately I can't force universities to institute a specific pay scale. So unfortunately, that's a discussion that has to happen at the university level. And the university, and we've had conversations through APS and other professional societies with university leadership that are moving towards that direction. And we're trying to compel everybody. We're saying, the money's right here. Take it. We're giving you the money so that you could pay the grad students better. But I understand the politics of it is a little bit more complicated on different campuses, and it's one that has to be decided at the campus level. But the resources are there if the universities want to take it up and actually use it too. So we're making sure that, again, I mentioned the fellowships that we directly pay students, they're already getting $45,000. But for the grants, we're making the money available so that you could do it. As far as your grant is concerned, I would just make sure you're very explicit with your program managers if your university doesn't allow you to do that, and make sure that you don't get dinged for that in your evaluation. You will not get dinged for that, right? It's not your fault. It's not the PI's fault that you can't pay $45,000 to your students. So we're making sure that things like this are addressed. And it's really a case-by-case basis because it depends at the university level. But it's an important one. Our hope is this will shift the pay scale for all grad students. It will push the federal, hopefully starting at the federal scale, but it move down to each individual level so that it actually has a positive change that is desperately needed, that is being called up, for by everyone at this point, really. Thank you.
Next one. Go ahead.
Hello. Enrique Fleischak, Catholic University and NASA Goddard Space Flight Center. I was really, I'm really interested in the 3 initiatives you talked about, the Renew, the Peer, and the Fair. I'm wondering if you've already seen impacts from that on, for example, how many students of color or women students are supported by those grants, or are there any measurable impacts yet, or is that going to come in the next few years?
So these are all brand new, right? Renew is the only one that's been out in the street for 1 year. And of course, it's funded a lot of really cool initiatives, but they're barely, not even a year old, these initiatives. Peer and FAIR were put into effect this fiscal year, so they're brand new. But we are following them, or collecting all the data so that we evaluate the effectiveness going forward. So you will stay tuned is the message on that one. We're following, we're going to make sure that all the data, because we want to learn, right? We want to learn, is this the right way to do it? Is there a slightly different approach? If there is one, we want to be able to understand what that is. So we're collecting the data. We're going to convene groups to think about how are we being effective, but of course in appropriate time. Right now, there's not much data I could tell you because everything is new.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Bob Bernstein, Fermilab. Comment and a piece of praise. So I've been doing comparative reviews for a long time, and I did a comparative review in Brian Beckford's office in Intensity Frontier for HEP. And I think the peer plans are great. It was really obvious where people were sincere or where it was boilerplate. It made a difference. We could give people constructive comments about how to improve their programs. So I just want to say that it was really nice to have that this year. And great job, tweak it, but that was a really good thing to do.
Thank you,
And
I appreciate it.
PIs, your reviewers are taking it seriously.
Thank you. And of course, if you have comments, we are all ears. We want to know how it's being received. We provided all sorts of resources and webinars and things. The staff at the Office of Science have made themselves available to answer any questions that people might have about how to put together an effective peer plan, make sure that people understand what we're looking for. And if you have any comments and feedback, please let us know. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sarah Deidra. I'm an undergrad at MSU, Michigan State.
Go Spartans!
Heck yeah. So I was wondering what kind of advice you might have for someone who's currently starting out their career and is a little apprehensive about potential discrimination.
Thank you. Unfortunately, science is not different than society, right? Everything that's happening in society happens in STEM too. So the best, what has worked for me and what I've seen work and what I've, again, delving into that scholarship is surrounding yourself with the network of supportive folks. That whatever happens, you have a safe place, a supportive environment where you'll be able to just focus on your work and do your work. And in some cases, even mentors like they did for me are wonderful in shielding you from all that stuff. Because simply speaking, as a human being, if stuff is happening to you and you're being excluded actively or being attacked, it's hard to focus on your work. So the best thing that I've seen and the best advice that I have for early career folks is make sure you have a supportive community around you and cultivate that community. Take charge in actively building that nurturing community around you, identifying who are the right people and engaging with them and nurturing those relationships in whatever way that you need, and making sure that even if you have the best supportive mentor, right? One person can't do everything for you. One person cannot be everything for you. So making sure that you're supporting yourself surrounding yourself with a supportive community and working to nurture that is, I think, the best thing that I feel like I've done for myself and what I've seen work. And it's probably the most important advice I would give folks coming out. Things will happen. Thankfully, professional communities and sometimes academic institutions are getting better at addressing these things, but professional communities, societies for sure. Huge props to APS and other communities, because there's a lot that has changed because the issues were not being addressed at the institutions. Professional societies had stepped in, and I think it made a huge, important difference. But even with that, people, sometimes things happen. So having that community that could help you weather is probably the best thing one can do for themselves. Thanks.
So, Sherry Yanella, Texas A&M. Dr. Berhe, first I'd like to thank you for a very inspiring talk. I think it's great. The new emphasis at the DOE, or the renewed emphasis at the DOE on this, is very important to many of us in the community. I'm sure all of the graduate students in the audience and those seeing remotely are thrilled at the idea of getting a raise. as you know, both the high energy community and the nuclear community are going through the P5 or the long range plan exercise. And in doing so, some of us have calculated what the cost would be to go from what their current salaries are up to this $45,000, and that's not trivial. So I guess I'm sure that all of my colleagues, the other fellow faculty, are thrilled at the pledge of new money to be able to raise these salaries, particularly in a world where lately we've seen constrained research budgets. So I don't know if the message just isn't getting to us of there's a golden pot somewhere, or if this money will flow in FY24, or how we're going to achieve this aspiration of 45K that the students so well deserve. And to keep in mind that we also have postdocs who are going to have incredible salary compression issues if we don't address the postdoc issues as well.
That's a fair question. So for the FY23, we've made that money available. It's obviously it requires prioritization. And we've made sure that this is an important issue that needed to be addressed, and it has been addressed. Going forward, of course, our job is to advocate for higher top line for the Office of Science, and it's precisely so that we could do everything that we need to do, including pay the grad students a fair, livable wage, right? I understand the compression of the research budget, but I think it's one that we just have to be able to balance the needs on all sides, because realistically speaking, grad students can't continue to go on at the level of the pay that they were receiving. Ideally, you and I and everybody else would want a lot more money to be able to do everything that we want to do and everything that is prioritized, through P5 and everything else. But the reality of the situation is we all have to make decisions that balance the portfolio in terms of all the kind of top priority things we need to address and everything else that we can include in the budget. This one happens to be a really important one for many reasons. If the students are not paid, they simply can't stay. It's become a huge challenge. And if we don't have the students to do this research, it won't really matter at the end of the day whether we have the funding or not. I think it's one of these issues that I think feel very strongly about being able to balance. Yes, we might not achieve the top dollar amount for everything that we want to do, but we have to be able to find a balance, middle ground where we can achieve the most important topics as we identify them. And this one in particular, for FY23, is already taken care of. It will continue to be taken care of to the best of our abilities, and we'll continue, us and APS and everybody else will continue to advocate for a higher top-line budget. That's what we do every day, really. Our jobs involve that, right? Trying to advocate for that budget so that we could get more resources towards the science. So I don't know if that answered your question, but you get the idea.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Let's take one from the right, and I'm being pointed out that we are running overtime.
Oops.
So let's take that.
Hi, so Dara Norman from Noir Lab in Tucson, Arizona. I'm really happy to hear about the peer program and these inclusion plans. I know NASA's done a similar thing with their programs. My postdoc and I had the opportunity to do some assessment of some of the NASA program work, and I'd really be interested in talking with you about how you're doing the assessment. My postdoc is a sociologist. I'm an astronomer, but I've hired a sociologist to work with me, and it's been really useful to have that background and knowledge and understanding about some of the issues in assessing the plans, but also in moving forward with how we train our colleagues in physics and astronomy to recognize good plans versus bad plans, because we really found that professional sociologists and DEI experts really look at things differently than scientists do and ask different questions. So I'd really like to talk to you about that.
Thank you. My professional career, I've done a lot of equity and inclusion work, but I've found it incredibly helpful to work with experts So sociologists and other social scientists who are actually experts in these areas that we're trying to address. So 100% with you. That's exactly the approach we're following in the Office of Science to evaluate this approach, because as far as, as great as we all would like to think that we are and we can be flexible in doing everything, it really helps to have experts to be able to do this. So by all means, do share with us and we can find a way.
Okay, thank you. Last and short.
Okay. My name is Wing Tu from CSU Stanislaus, up the street from UC Merced. Hello. First of all, maybe speaking on behalf of maybe some of the MSIs in California, this Renew, FAIR, and Peer initiatives are all really great. We really appreciate that it's aimed towards us. One of the things that my experience so far has seen is that not only do the faculty and students need the support at these MSI, but also like on the administrative side. Because my administrator never had worked with DOE, she had to make her PAM account, and it was some delay, and also the MSI also don't have buffer money. So if you want us to start a project by May 1st, we actually need that money before May 1st because we don't have buffer money that you can just say, oh, just start the project, and then the university will buffer that money until the money comes in. I was wondering if there are thoughts about that at your office, where the MSIs are a little bit different from the R1s, right, where we don't have this type of administrative and financial support.
Indeed. I mean, this is exactly the kind of conversation we've had a lot with the folks in the Office of Science to make sure that we are recognizing that there are resource limitations between different kinds of institutions and trying to figure out where the barriers are for the smaller institutions and remove them. So I strongly encourage you to reach out to the folks in the programs that you're working with, but if there are things that still can't be addressed, do let us know, and we're happy to, again, this is a learning experience as we're implementing these things. So if there are things that we're missing, we really would like to know. But I agree with you. Having worked at an MSI, the constraints are real. Thank you.
Okay, now the real last.
Just two really short comments from each of us. So speaking to you, not in my role at APS, but as a faculty member at Johns Hopkins and a resident of Baltimore, I would like to lift up one other stigmatized community, and that's the formerly incarcerated who face huge barriers to employment. And so I hope the DOE labs allow people who have done their time, gone straight, to be employed. Thank you.
And the last.
Thank you. My name is Young-Ki Kim from University of Chicago, President-elect of APS. Thank you very much. As you know, that the diversity of leadership positions is crucial, and I came here to thank you. You have 10 national science labs, and last year, Leah Morminga became Film Lab Director. This year, just announced that Joanne Hewitt will become Director of Brookhaven National Laboratory. So I just came here to thank you. It's really your leadership made a huge difference. So please keep up the good work.
Thank you. Thank you. Really appreciate that. Thank you.
Let's go to the second talk now. If there is time later, I'm sure that we can have the discussion going. So it is my pleasure to now introduce Dr. Deidra Hodges. Deidra is an associate professor and chair of the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering at Florida International University. Dr. Hodges is an exceptional leader in photovoltaic and solar energy research with extensive experience in X-ray gamma radiation detectors for national security. Dr. Hodges is highly focused on advancing renewable energy, sustainability, nuclear materials, and extreme photon sensing. She has achieved solar cell power conversion efficiencies greater than 21%, which is approaching almost the world record of 25% or so. Her network spans from Department of Energy's laboratories, including Brookhaven National Lab, Kansas City National Security Center, Honeywell, and National Renewable Energy Laboratory, collaborating with scientists there as well as the users. She was educated at Columbia University and at University of South Florida. After working at IBM, Martin Marietta Manned Space Systems, Southern Polytechnical State University, and University of Texas at El Paso, she has now joined Florida International University, where she chairs the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering. Through all these years, she has also served as a U.S. Navy Reserve. Through her career, she has been involved in helping students from URM, underrepresented minorities of all kinds, in STEM fields, and we would like to hear her thoughts on all of these topics. Thank you. And Dr. Hodges joins us from Puerto Rico today, where she is on an assignment.
Thank you, everyone, and good morning, and thank you for the presentation. I am currently at the ASEE Dean's Institute with my dean and other colleagues, and sorry I'm not with you in person. So this morning, I would like to take a moment of your time to talk about successes and challenges of current and also past initiatives in the U.S. of improving minority participation in science and technology, looking at both in the academics as well as in industry. So you've heard already, I'm an associate professor and a chair of the ECE department at Florida International University. Just a little bit about me. Some of the courses that I've taught include quantum mechanics, semiconductor devices, ICs, semiconductor materials, characterization, PV, and renewable energy. My research areas, you've heard a little bit, perovskite, solar cells, thin film materials, gamma ray radiation detection, and more recently, quantum circuits for quantum sensing and computing. I started out in a dual degree program, what's a 3+2? So I did 3 years at a small HBCU institution, Dillard University in New Orleans, Louisiana, and my 2 years was at Columbia University. From Dillard University in that 3+2, I received a BS in physics, and from Columbia University, I received a BS in electrical engineering. I stayed on at Columbia University for my master's in electrical engineering. During my undergraduate years, I participated in internships every summer, 2 at Corning Glassworks, 1 in Corning, New York, also at Stanford at the Linear Accelerator Center. For me, usually when I'm told I can't do something because of my race or my gender, I'm more motivated than ever to do that. So here I'm showing a few pictures where when I was an undergraduate studying physics, I appeared in the Ebony magazine in the 80s. And then the next photo in the center showing me at Martin Marietta, which is now Lockheed Martin, receiving a very prestigious award for Independent Research and Development of the Year, and IRAD, with my dad, with me in the receipt of this award. The picture to the bottom right are highlighting some of my experiences as an U.S. Navy Reserve officer in the engineering field division. As an officer, I was also trained by the Marine Corps, Camp Pendleton, at their School of Infantry. So a lot of experiences as a underrepresented female. And more recently, in bringing into quantum computing in my research, I started last year and continuing right now. I'd like to say in my free time, early in the morning before the start of the day, I'm taking quantum courses at MIT. I'm on my 3rd quantum course right now, a little behind. Here's a timeline of my career path, showing first my 3-2 at Dillard University, 2 years at Columbia, and then staying on another year for the MS in the early 80s. Moving on to IBM, my first job at IBM Federal Systems Division in Clear Lake, Texas, while at IBM, joining the U.S. Navy Reserves. And from there, receiving an offer from Martin Marietta in the early 90s. And While at Marietta or in New Orleans, I was displaced at the bottom center of the screen. You'll see by Hurricane Katrina. And as a result of being there during Hurricane Katrina, I moved to, or was displaced to Florida, to Tampa, Florida. And there I enrolled and completed my PhD in electrical engineering at the University of South Florida. Leaving the University of South Florida, going to Southern Polytechnic State University in Marietta, Georgia, as an assistant professor in electrical engineering. And then leaving there, going to the University of Texas at El Paso as an assistant professor in the electrical and computer engineering department. And more recently, right now, as an associate professor at Florida International University and the department chair of electrical and computer engineering. So now I'm going to talk about, we're looking at successes and challenges of current and past initiatives. In the US, improving minority participation in science and technologies, both in the academy and in industry. Looking at race and ethnicity of college faculty. Here I'm showing some statistics from the Department of Education, where we look at the total. If we're looking at academic rank, we're seeing that overall total, the percentage of faculty in the academic rate, the largest percentage, 40% white male, and then 35% white female. So 75% white hold the largest percentage in the academic rank in academia. And if I look to say, where do I stand as a Black female? Overall, I see that total percentage is 3. If I look within the further ranks, I'm currently an associate professor and working very hard for the promotion to full professor. I see that that percentage is even smaller. It decreases from 3 to 2%. At my previous institution, the University of Texas at El Paso, I looked at some diversity data when I was there. So this is in 2020. The University of Texas at El Paso is a minority serving institution with a large population showing here almost 60% Hispanic. Similarly the same as the institution where I'm currently, Florida International University is also a minority serving institution, but within MSIs, we are an Hispanic serving institution, a HSI. So UTEP as an HSI, I asked, what are the stats for Black or African Americans? So UTEP in 2020 had 2% Black or African American faculty. The University of Texas, I compared that to the UT data. Overall, University of Texas is a PWI, primary white institution, with the large percentage of their population, over 63%. And again, I asked, what's the percentage of Blacks or African American? Over 6%. So a higher percentage than that of the University of Texas and El Paso, but still a low percentage overall. I like to highlight this law. The Science and Engineering Equal Opportunities Act, it is a law. It was signed into law 40 years ago. It's a law that states it is in the national interest to promote the full use of human resources in science and engineering, and to ensure the full development and use of scientific and engineering talents and skills of men and women equally, of all ethnic, racial, and ethnic backgrounds. This is a 40-year-old law. But, in academia and in industry, are we adhering to this law? Here was a study from Harvard Business School looking at industry now. They did a case study on Coca-Cola and how Coca-Cola built strength on diversity. In this case study in 2000, the Coca-Cola company settled the largest racial discrimination lawsuit in history, resulting in a $192.5 million settlement. This was in 2000. I like to say that right now, that's not the largest suit. Right before this session, I Googled it because, records are always being broken. And right now, $253 million is the largest discrimination lawsuit against a pharma company called Novartis. But anyway, with this data in Coca-Cola, a task force was appointed by the court to oversee the company's diversity efforts. The focus of the diversity work was the treatment of female and minority employees equitably in different areas: hiring, evaluations, raises, and promotions. This was in industry. We have these same processes in the academy. Coca-Cola is now recognized by a broad range of organizations as a leader in fairness and diversity as a result of this. So the court was involved, and metrics were taken. Minority representation at assistant vice president level and above increased. The percentage of women in these positions increased. In some instances, percentages doubled. Below the executive rank, minority managers' percentages increased. How were these results achieved? Through the institution of some programs. Measurable programs include, and initiatives include those that were designed to recruit, mentor, and retain women and minorities. They were established at Coca-Cola. 30% of the new hires were persons of color, including 20% who were African American. Among senior managers, 40% of the new hires were persons of color, including 23% who were African American. So also mentoring programs were instituted and other activities. So I like to say I attended a Women of Color conference at Stanford, and we asked, I think it was the associate provost, where are the faculty of color? Why aren't they hiring faculty of color? And we were told that his problem is not in hiring faculty of color, but it's in the retention. And the same at UT and UT Austin, they hire at twice the rate because of they know that many will leave. We asked at that Stanford conference, why are they leaving? We were told because the environment was not inclusive. So if retention is an issue and the environment is not inclusive, the next question was, well, why is the environment not inclusive? Or more important, how can the environment become inclusive so that there's attrition? A little bit more, I like to share a little bit more here. One other comment on that, I talked to one person with the lawsuit. From one colleague, I was told that some companies in industry actually budget for these discrimination or these EOOC lawsuits and prepare for that it's almost like expected or normal. But anyway, a little bit more about me. Here in my background, my research is talking about this one area of synchrotron and optical probing of these mixed perovskites for photovoltaics and radiation detectors. I am a user. I spent many years, I'm going to jump into this. I spent many years at Brookhaven National Lab in the summer as a visiting faculty, bringing both my research samples and my students as a user of their facilities and a visiting faculty in one of their departments with radiation detection and national security. So 10 years as a matter of fact. I also spent some of those same summers going to the National Renewable Energy Lab, collaborating with scientists in photovoltaics. What I'm not showing here are some more recent experiences with scientists at Oak Ridge National Lab, having traveled there recently, at Idaho National Lab and Sandia National Lab. Some new conversations and new engagements in the area of both quantum and nuclear, and looking for pipelines of our students and collaborative research opportunities with scientists at those labs. Here's some of the research highlights from my research with perovskite solar cells and the high efficiencies. We're getting above 21%, approaching that world record held by Korea of over 25%, with a lot of help from scientists at Brookhaven National Lab, help from scientists at NREL, the DOE National Renewable Energy Lab. We've also traveled to Oxford University in the UK twice to get help with our research to get these exceptional results. And looking at the chemistry, this perovskite, just taking a few minutes to talk about the research side of what we do. These perovskites have this ABX3 stoichiometry. So at this A site, it's a cation that we use, methylammonium. We also use formidium and cesium. At the B site, the center of this unit cell here, we use a lead cation. And on the faces of this unit cell, at the X site, a halogen. We're showing iodine in the structure, but we also use bromine and chlorine. So we can synthesize these materials very inexpensively, but tune their properties and get some great results from them. The challenge with these materials, we can see that at elevated temperatures, these perovskites are in a cubic structure where the lattice constant is the same. The spacing is the same on each side, but with change in temperature, their structures change from tetragonal at room temperature to orthorhombic at low temperature. We use the Goldsmith's tolerance factor, this relationship between the effective radii at each AB and the X site at each of the elements there, or the compounds. We use this as opposed to using density functional theory or molecular dynamics as a figure of merit to get a quick estimate of or quick indicator of what formulation may yield high efficiency devices for us. And looking at different formulations here, whose Goldsmith's tolerance factor is between 0.9 and 1, and evaluating their efficiency in a photovoltaic device. Prior to making the device, we characterize the perovskite materials. We use synchrotron radiation at Brookhaven National Lab at NLS2, the synchrotron light source, using several of the beam lines to perform ZANES and ZAFS XRF and XPD studies on these perovskite materials, as well as their Center for Functional Nanomaterial and some other advanced equipment to also do some characterization, looking at photoluminescence lifetime, XPS, UPS, SEM, so forth. And I'll show you some of that data, just an excerpt of some of the data that help us achieve great results in our research. And looking at ZANES, these perovskites, the lead can be in different oxidation states. We want it in that +2. How do we know it's in a +2 after we synthesize it? One very important tool at that user facility, that synchrotron radiation using ZANES will tell us precisely what oxidation state that lead to cation is in, and verify that we're in the +2 state after all of the processing, synthesis, annealing of these materials. At the Center for Functional Nanomaterials, just highlighting some of the characterization tools that we're using. We use, again, X-ray XPS, X-ray photoelectron spectroscopy, to look at both the concentration, to evaluate the stoichiometry, look at the elemental concentration. If we look at the top right, we see very little oxygen 1s. But on the next slide, I'm going to show you 1 month later, the amount of oxygen increased significantly in this material, which degrades the perovskite. We need it not to oxidize. That's one of the issues, the stability with perovskites. It absorbs the moisture. And so we're working on how to keep the moisture out. So this technique lets us know the concentration of oxygen, and then looking at photoluminescence, we can tune the band gaps. Certain band gaps absorb the visible spectrum, certain wavelengths in the visible spectrum for PV more efficiently, so we can tune the band gap with the chemistry again. How do we know? We use photoluminescence or PL. We can also using PL to look at the lifetime of the charge carriers, wanting long lifetime. If we're synthesizing it and have high defects, then we would have a short lifetime in recombination. So a lot of tools and instruments at the DOE facility provided us the capability to do the research and get this kind of data to affect or impact the results of our research. Here's XPS, a wide scan survey showing that increased concentration of oxygen 35 days later. The sample is absorbing moisture from the atmosphere. Looking at the high resolution XPS, looking at shifts in the binding energy also is another indicator if our stoichiometry is off. And then getting toward the end, looking at X-ray diffraction data, we can evaluate the composition, the chemical composition of material structure and the phase. So looking if there are additional secondary phases, we want pure materials, but XRD is a quick indicator if we have defects in our material through secondary phases and are able to go back and change processing conditions and our chemistry to remove the secondary phases. So that's the perovskite material, the main absorber material. And here's the device where we put all the materials together. So the PV device, starting with the substrate and fluorine doped tin oxide, next depositing a layer of tin oxide as the ETL, and followed by the perovskite as the main absorber layer, followed by a deposition layer of spirometallite, our HTL layer, and lastly with a back contact using silver and or gold. That's our device structure, and making the PV device itself. Similarly, absorber materials for X-ray detection. Similarly, we won't present those results here, but we will just highlight the PV, photovoltaics. Again, using characterization tools, the dual beam fib, SEM, to do cross sections, to look at each layer and do analysis on the layers of different materials and understanding the thicknesses of the layer, any defects in the layer, to go back and perfect the device. Here we're using atomic force microscopy to look at the surface roughness, the grain size, the thickness. Again, our processing parameters affect the structure and how the materials form. So SEM, AFM, and now electrical characterization, looking at IV current voltage and EQE data of the devices. So these are showing our best devices so far today, where we're getting efficiencies over 21%, but showing that different stoichiometry, the different chemistry and the different processing conditions, time, temperature, annealing temperature affects all of these parameters together, affect the outcome of the device, and having a control of these. So here are some of the students in my lab. This was my lab at the University of Texas at El Paso, and now similarly at FIU, where we're able to synthesize some materials and characterize some materials, make the devices, but to do the advanced characterization, we rely upon the Department of Energy user facilities. And so I am a user of the facilities, and we've gone to DOE's user facilities for almost 10 summers. That's this second row. And we also travel and present. And so you can see we're at NREL in the third row, and I think Stony Brook and BNL at some pictures on the bottom row. So what's not shown here are, and we're pipeline. We bring students from the minority serving institution into the government lab. So we serve as a pipeline. And what's not shown now are recent activities with engagement with, I would say, my 3 new labs. And that's, we've engaged Oak Ridge and for quantum research. Oak Ridge, Idaho National Lab for nuclear research, and most recently Sandia, maybe a couple of weeks ago at the ECE Chairs Conference. We had a chance to tour that facility. And so with that, I would like to go ahead and open it up for questions.
Again, we'll do the same thing. Questions on this side. There are microphones both sides. Maybe while people think, let me ask a question. You showed this, the things that your group did at National Labs, the successful things. Could you comment on certain things that you tried and that did not work? Or would you have suggestions for the mode of operation that you tried and did not work for undergraduates or graduate researchers in your group? Success stories, yeah.
Yeah, success stories are the opportunities that are available, the abilities just to be able to use the facilities and go to the labs. Those are the success stories. The challenges are the same thing. The lack of opportunities, right? It's the same thing. You know, there are not as many. The opportunities are few and far between. So, yeah, and I'll give an example. The DOE Renew, that's a new opportunity that's out. I've submitted twice to that opportunity without success. I've submitted to many DOE opportunities without success. So, you know, while we have success with the facilities and gaining access and doing this, but competing and actually, you know, getting funding from some of these opportunities is a challenge.
Do you have comments? I don't see any. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Hi. You talked about how it's not just hiring minority faculty, but retention that is a challenge. What kind of changes have been shown to be effective in making academic environments more inclusive and improving retention?
That's an excellent question. And I think that's the key to this, right? How do we make not only an academic, let me say this applies to industry. This applies to the government. If you look at where I served in the Navy, you know, I served I was an officer over a group of men. If you look at the makeup there, it was primarily white males. I saw very few Black females, very few underrepresented minorities in the Navy. If I go to the DOE labs, I'm going to use Brookhaven, I saw very few underrepresented groups in the lab or people working there. You know, if I go to Oak Ridge, I'm going to say the same thing. I don't see a lot of minority scientists at these labs. So, you know, my question is, how do we bring inclusion into industry? We can go into industry. We can go to the pharmaceutical industry. We can go into an office and look around and say, where is diversity? Where is inclusion? Where are the underrepresented groups? That's not just 2 or 3%. So it's not just academia, but academia, our government, industry. How do we, you know, your question is the right question. How do we get these environments more inclusive so that if someone is hired, that they stay, so that we have attrition? And one way, this is just my idea personally, my thought to doing that. One is, I think we have to change the hiring process, because from my understanding, when we hire, and from what I've seen, we tend to hire people that look like us. So I've served on search committees in academia, and we don't necessarily pick, the best candidate. It seems like some candidates, whoever's the strongest on that search committee, the candidate that's selected tends to look like, so, so we're hiring. So my thought is we have to change that hiring process so that we don't keep getting that, where we hire people that look like only us. If we change that hiring process to where we hire a more diverse population, and then we begin to make that environment, that work environment, more diverse. And that's across academia and industry and the government. And then I think we would have a more inclusive and welcoming environment. And those are just my personal thoughts to where the bottleneck may lie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I don't see any more questions. Let's thank Professor Hodges. And now we go to the last talk of this session, Dr. Kétévi Assamagan. Dr. Assamagan is a physicist at Brookhaven National Lab. He's a member of the Atlas experiment at CERN. His research interests focus on searches of physics beyond the standard model. He has held many important positions within the collaboration, leading aspects of detectors and analysis. He was born and brought up in Togo. He came to the US with a scholarship managed by the African American Institute from the US Agency for International Development. He did his PhD at University of Virginia and a postdoc at Hampton University to work at Jefferson Lab before he joined Brookhaven National Lab. He has held many visiting scientist positions, including at Saclay in France, as well as University of Johannesburg, University of Witwatersrand, and also University of South Africa. He has been elected Fellow of the American Academy of Sciences. He's a Fellow of, the African Academy of Sciences. He is a Fellow of South African Institute of Physics, and also Fellow of American Physical Society. As was mentioned earlier, he is a co-founder of the African School for Physics. He is very passionate about getting African American and other minorities successfully integrated into physics activities. He cannot be here, unfortunately, but a good reason is that he is doing what he is going to talk about. He's joining us from Kinshasa, and he'll tell us why we should be supporting STEM training in underdeveloped and developing countries in Africa and South America. Thank you, Kétévi, and you're on.
Okay, so today I'm going to talk about why should the US support science education in Africa and Latin America. I apologize that I am not there with you guys. I am in Kinshasa, the Democratic Republic of Congo, for the 10th week, Science and Technology Week. This event is organized every year to promote science and education, especially for the youth. The picture to the right at the top over there and the bottom is the Congo River, which is the second longest river in Africa after the Nile. So I will talk about why the US care about help in Africa and Latin America. I mentioned SNOMAC's recommendation with respect to engagement with emerging countries, and specifically the case of Africa, and then I will conclude. So why should the US care about help high energy physics in Africa and Latin America? It is a legitimate question which was asked during the SNOMAS process, and in response, we work on a white paper to address that question. First, engagement with developing countries help strengthen domestic relations through international diversity to develop US institutions and also He helped in developing healthy relationship with foreign institutions, information flow, cultural exchange. There are examples like the U.S. Agency for International Development, the Fulbright Program, the African American Institutes, NGOs, and so forth. Furthermore, the U.S. offers studies and programs to improve international engagement and cultural awareness and sensitivities through the Title VI Act, which is a provision of the 1965 Higher Education Act to support area of studies that serve national interests. So this program reflects the priority placed by the federal government on areas of studies, specifically with respect to diplomacy, national security, trade competitiveness. Furthermore, the UN General Assembly proclaimed 2022 as the International Year of Basic Science and Sustainable Development to improve the quality of life of all people around the world. The UN proclamation resulted from efforts made by international scientific communities, including CERN, IUPAC, and others under the auspices of UNESCO. These serve to support constructive engagement with developing countries to improve the physics education and research program for the benefit of humankind. So through this enormous process, we made a few recommendations for engagement toward developing countries. Specifically, such engagement need to improve for international diversity and popular development and global visibility of help. So universities, laboratory, and help groups should improve and sustain international outreach, partnerships, schools, workshops, conferences, training, short visit for research and development of research consortia. Mechanisms should be developed to facilitate the participation of colleagues from developing countries. Large international research collaboration should improve efforts to facilitate integration and participation of research groups from developing countries and support efforts to foster help in these countries. So now I'm going to say a bit about the African countries that have formal research program in high energy physics. I start with Morocco, which joined Atlas in 1996 and hosted the Atlas Week in 2013. It has 7 clusters and participates in electromagnetic calorimeter and all sort of physics research in the standard model and beyond. And he also has collaborations in neutrino astrophysics experiments of Antares and KM3net. Egypt is a member of CMS since 2010, and 2019, another institute from Egypt also joined CMS to work on the RPC trigger and do all sort of physics in the standard model and beyond. We also have a supercomputer lab. Madagascar is the latest country to make the step toward big international collaboration. They joined June in 2016. I will say a bit more about the particular efforts. South Africa is joined ALICE since 2001, and then in 2010 they joined Atlas, and that one was an effort with the participation of Brookhaven National Lab, where South Africa was affiliated from 2008 to 2010 before the joined Atlas. They also have strong contribution to the nuclear physics program of Isolde, Bridge Theory program, and also computing. So Algeria attempted to become an associate member of CMS, an associate member of LHCb through an institution in Brazil, but however, this did not succeed because of various problems. Currently, they are technical associate institute in Atlas, which means that they are actually not the member and they are not paying joining fees, but they are doing some work for Atlas, some technical work, which is porting Atlas software to parallel architecture to help Atlas computing in the challenges of high luminosity environment, and also they are developing tools to monitor database access. So then now in this yellow, you see a lot of countries, which means that these countries have members or citizens who are practicing or are doing high energy physics, but the countries themselves don't have a formal high energy program, which means that these folks are employed in different countries, sometimes a few of them in South Africa and the rest in Europe and North America. So how to make those people become useful to their country is a big issue that certainly needs to be addressed. More recently, Senegal joined the ERC, South Africa as well, as work in progress. Senegal and Togo are looking to join Atlas, and Zambia, the EIC. So we have been developing a lot of capacity. I will mention the African School of Physics, which is organized in many different African countries, and is in between the school. There are a lot of activities that happen online lectures. There's a mentorship program, and also we make connection to policymakers so to make sure that the program that is presented supports the plan or development plan of the host country itself. And then we also have a short-term visit program. And in this school, I would say that, you know, we have made a lot of effort. For example, in the plots that is at the top there, it's the distribution of participants as a function of the country of citizenship. In this particular instance, you can see the female to male ratio here, which is quite impressive. And most of the students come at the master's level, and by that time they are a little bit older, 26, 27, which means that they have a lot of challenges during the education programs, and they have to stop, and for various reasons, or work, and that slow down their progress. So high energy physics is about 20% of the community in Africa. So many people are in many different fields, and so we have to cater to this diverse community by broadening the curriculum. We started with high energy physics, but we have to add other fields as well. And during the COVID pandemic, you know, from March 2020 to July 2021, there were about 20 students who got PhD, and 1/3 of those people were in HEP. And there were others before the pandemic, and also since then there are new ones. And during the pandemic, we made an exercise where we asked the students that they should take their own data from their countries and they should model it. And 10 countries that we considered at that time, and that was over 50% of all of the COVID cases in Africa. And so these students came in with different background and fluency in different languages, and so understanding of English was different, and so that presented a lot of challenges, and from different time zones, and so we have to make a lot of efforts to make sure that all of those things people are integrated and can participate. And the chart that you see over here is actually the South African data, the first year of South African data. It shows the death rate and the active cases and the recovered cases and the total cases of COVID. And here is actually the data and the model that are on top of each other. South Africa has over 50% of the COVID cases in Africa at the time. It's a lot of data. So you don't see the statistical uncertainty on the points. And out of that, they were able to extract the R number, which when above 1 tells you that the pandemic is growing, or below 1 is slowing. And then they also model they try to study how well they modeled the data, and they even extracted the fraction of the people that were infected but did not show any symptom. And that fraction is not measured in the data. And in the process, they learned a bunch of things, and they also they published the data, so they had to learn to write the published paper and also answer referee questions. So we also organized during the pandemic the second African conference, which draw a lot of participation. It was 754 countries were represented, 33 from Africa in this green here. These are some of the participants, and this distribution is according to number of graduate students and research faculties and so forth that participated in this event. So now I will tell you about some of the impact that we have. So this gentleman, Lazar, participated in ESP 2010. Then he got a PhD grant to work on Minerva. And after that, he decided to get his country into the Dune experiment, and Brookhaven also helped with that. And this young lady attended the school in 2016 and got her PhD in renewable energies. And then she went back to Rwanda and is co-founder of the Rwandan Association of Women in Science and Engineering. And they are doing a lot of things over there, trying to keep the girls in school, preventing early unwanted pregnancies and stuff like that. And she's currently working for the Rwandan Ministry of Education. This gentleman got his PhD in on Phoenix. He attended the school in 2010. He's currently a lecturer at the University of Zambia, and we are looking at him to take his country to join the EIC. And during SNOMAS 2021, there were Africans who participated, a small number, but nevertheless there were people, had people from Cameroon, Nigeria, Senegal, South Africa, Togo, Tunisia, Zambia, Egypt. They were all represented. This gentleman has been doing Rwanda as a theorist of heavy iron. He's also a dean of science at Nelson Mandela University. He served in the SNOMAS Advisory Committee. He was also co-convener of the community engagement topical group on public education. And he co-authored many white papers. And Diallo Boy is a postdoc at BNL. He attended the community summer study and gave a talk on testing DM with the Higgs boson based on this white paper. Mohamed Zazua was a student, but he did a study to propose the addition of DM, vector DM interpretation to the Higgs portal dark matter plot. There were only scalar Majorana fermion interpretation before then. And he also proposed to extend that interpretation below 1 GeV, and this was a paper jointly by Mohammed Senk University in Morocco and also the University of Johannesburg and AF10. That's another thing that we are doing to try to bring African institutes together to work together. I'll talk a bit about the short-term visit for research program, which started in 2019. I'd like to thank DOE and BNL for supporting this program. And so through this program, we bring in students from Africa and we place them in different research groups. Over here, we have students who are working in ITK and also in Dune, and one of them was in our Center for Functional Nanomaterial. And so they come from various countries. So there was a group that came in 2019 and then a group that came in 2022. And we hope that this program can grow and that they don't necessarily have to come to only Brookhaven, but they can also go to many other institutions or research labs or universities across the country. I mentioned one thing here. So when we had the school in December 2022 in South Africa, this alumna, Munia Lassiri, was a student in 2016, participated in the school in 2016, and then in 2022 she came back as a lecturer, and here she was leading a hands-on tutorial in Giant for African students, and she also participated in outreach to secondary schools. And during that event, one a female student came to her and said, I didn't know a physicist would look like you. I always thought they are male with crazy hair and dusty lab coat. But you are a young woman, you dress well, you look normal, and you don't even look like, you don't even need a lab coat. You can see the rest of the story here. Now it gets even better. So currently, Munia is developing a collaboration with our instrumentation division to use CZT detectors for 3D PET imaging. Now, I want to mention something about the African Physics newsletter, which you may not know about. It emerged from a survey of African physics conducted by the African Physics Project in collaboration with APS, IOP, EPS, South African Institute of Physics, and ICTP. The goal is to bridge communication gaps between African physicists in the country or among countries and outside. It's a mechanism to communicate with a broad group of physicists in Africa, in diaspora, and elsewhere. So the publication started in 2019. The working model is that there are 4 publications a year. African physicists collect the publication material and review them, and then it's passed to APS, which then review them again, format them, and distribute them. And this newsletter is showing that Africa has a vibrant physics community. A lot of things are happening, which you can see here. What is coming next is that we'll have the 3rd African conference. I showed you about the 2nd one, which was very successful, was online. This one will be hybrid, will be in South Africa, in the city of George, which is here. Here is Cape Town. There's Berhe, where we had a school in last December. And there's going to be a lot of graduate students represented here. If you are looking for graduate students, and may join this conference and for an opportunity to meet a whole lot of them. The last thing I'm going to mention is the African Strategy for Fundamental and Applied Physics. It's mandated by the African Physical Society. It exists. It includes other fields, unfortunately, other fields beyond HEP. The idea is to follow the steps of our colleagues in Latin America who have successfully just completed their first strategy, and to learn the process of community-driven physics roadmap exercise like we have been doing. We did in the US through SNOMAS or as was done in Europe, and to strengthen the African Physical Society and to complement top-down strategies which executed at the level of the African Union or African science academies. The slow progress, recently an interim report was delivered to the International Advisory Committee. Now, to conclude, why should the US care about high energy physics developing countries? The US should care about physics in developing countries to support national interests, values, and ideas with the collateral benefit of seeding self-sustaining